let's move on to Friday Night Lights. And let's see one game everyone has circled. I'll start. I'm going to go with Fresno State. It's a team that I think is undervalued in the Mountain West. They've dealt with some injuries. A couple weeks ago, they couldn't even run full practices because they had so many injuries. They've won 2 straight. They won at UNLV. They won easily against San Jose State at home. I think that they're undervalued. They'll probably be catching double digits against Nevada, and Nevada is coming off of a game, big, huge win against New Mexico, probably stamped their tournament berth. They've won 3 straight, including San Diego State, Air Force, New Mexico. A little bit of a letdown spot here after such a monumental win. They got that roll at the end, one at the buzzer to sweep the season series against Mexico. In 2 games they probably should have lost. But I think this Fresno State team, they're just a tough team to beat by margin because they play so slow. They make you run offense forever, and they defend so well. The offense is very limited. They go through droughts, but I think they can get some things done here against Nevada's defense. So give me Fresno. I think they're a bit undervalued for some of the things they were dealing with a couple weeks ago. They're starting to come into their own. So I think this is a good spot to fade Nevada at home. Mike, what you got?
This might be my top play since we started the podcast. I was shocked when this number came live. I actually had it at the team I like -7. It's -2.5. Go with Youngstown State, laying 2.5 at Fort Wayne. This is a revenge game for the Penguins. They lost by 5 to the Mastodons on New Year's Eve. Since then, they're 9-1 straight up. Youngstown is the best covering team in the Horizon, 15-8 against the spread, 13-7 as a favorite. 4 starters averaging 13 or more, but Dwayne Cohill has been absolutely special.
Fireball.
He's incredible. Almost 18 points per game, 5 assists, 3.5 boards, shooting just a hair under 50% from 3-point range. As a team, they're second nationally in shooting efficiency. This is the Youngstown team to break the curse of March Madness. They're going to go dancing for the first time. It's time to get in on them. This may be the last time you get a real nice number. I understand it's hard to win on the road in conference play, but like I said, this is off by about 5 points in my opinion. So I'm going to take the Penguins laying 2.5.
Yeah, Cohill. I mean, the Horizon tournament is going to be really interesting. I think Youngstown is the best team, but you have teams. I mean, they play no defense, but their offense is electric, led by Cohill. Similar to Detroit. Detroit plays even less defense, and they are electric on offense, and they're led by Antoine Davis, who is a flamethrower of his own. So, and then you have a bunch of odd teams, some teams who run zone and some just solid teams on both ends. So it's going to be a really interesting conference tournament to break down. But I think Youngstown State is your likely favorite. BJ, what do you got for Friday?
I'm going to go with Akron -1 on the road at Ohio. This is a big thing. Akron is the best defensive team in the MAC. They're coming off that loss on Tuesday to Toledo at home, but I think this is a good spot for them. Ohio defensively has been terrible, and the biggest thing for Ohio is they let teams at the free throw line at one of the highest rates in the MAC. Well, Akron's shooting close to 80% from the free throw line. They hardly ever turn the ball over. Ohio cannot defend the 3-point line whatsoever, and Akron's taking the most threes of anybody in the MAC. And like I started, the flip side, Ohio takes a ton of threes themselves, and Akron's the best team in the MAC at defending the 3-point line. So at a short number of -1, give me the Zips on the road.
Let's move to Saturday and talk our circled spots. We'll go around the horn as always.
So you get the Michael Calabrese special here because I graduated from Loyola, Maryland, but spent many weekends up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania at Lehigh, enjoying the fine camaraderie there amongst all the engineers. This game, I'll play this up to the Mountain Hawks -7. Loyola is in free fall. In Patriot League play, they are 9th in scoring, which is second to last, and dead last in scoring defense. Lehigh on the other side is a quality team. They're 3rd in scoring in the Pat League, 5th in scoring defense. Loyola, as I mentioned, just in this uncontrolled dive, lost 6 of 7 straight up. 2 road wins for the entire season at Bucknell and Binghamton, who were 297th and 313th respectively in KenPom. They can't score. They can't shoot from the line. 360th nationally at 61.4%. and one of the very worst defensive rebounding teams. Of all the things, if you told me at the beginning of the year for the Greyhounds that because of their size, they'd be able to rebound, I could at least talk myself into that. They haven't been able to do it. They're 358th in defensive rebounds per game. And then finally, when you look for a team to be able to pull away, Lehigh won by 4 down in Baltimore. They had 3-point shooting to kick this up into double digits in this game. They're 64th nationally, shooting 36.2% from deep. And I like Lehigh's backcourt a lot. I think this is a team that could win the Patriot League tournament, between Taylor, Higgins Jr., and Whitney Sidney. They average 42 points per game as a trio out of that backcourt. So I'm going to go ahead and play Lehigh. You should follow me on this one. Take those winnings, head down to the Tally Ho. Karaoke starts at 10 p.m. on Thursday or on Saturday night. So enjoy yourself there in Bethlehem.
The Tally Ho. I used to go to Tally Ho Liquors in, I think it's, Tally Ho Spirits in Wilmington, Delaware, when I was I think it's still there. And then down the street was another shout out to my guy, for one of my favorite liquor stores in all of Delaware, smaller spot, but Tally Ho Liquor's big place. And they used to take my fake when I was under 21. This is God, forever ago. But Tally Ho Spirits is connected to a Wawa in Wilmington, right off of 202. Anyway, BJ, what do you got?
I'll go Illinois at home against Rutgers. I think this is a really good spot for Illinois, who hasn't played this week. They've had a full week off since the 2-point loss at Carver Hawkeye Arena. Rutgers coming off that loss against Indiana on Tuesday. But most importantly, they lost Mag for the season, which is a huge loss for them, especially defensively.
Killer on defensive. Yeah.
Yeah. Second best defensive rebounder. He's actually leading in an offense, but he's actually leading the team in 2-point field goal percentage from inside the arc. So for an offense that's really struggled this season, they're losing their best interior offensive player. And the thing is Rutgers, yes, they are one of the best defensive teams in the country. They're the best defensive team in the Big Ten, but they're 12th in the Big Ten in conference play in defensive rebounding percentage. And like I already mentioned, they just lost their second best defensive rebounder. Illinois is 3rd in the Big 12 in offensive rebounding percentage. They're really struggling for 3-point range, which means there's going to be a lot of second chance opportunities, balls bouncing off the rim. So the other problem here for Rutgers is they do struggle offensively. They can't shoot from outside the arc. A lot of their shots are coming at the rim. Illinois is 2nd in the country in points per possession allowed at the rim. So for a Rutgers team that can't shoot, doesn't have one of their best interior players, this is a really, really good spot for Illinois on a week-long rest at home in Champaign. So Ken Palm has this at Illinois -2. I'm sure it'll be up there a little more with Mag being out. So I'll go Illinois -5.5 or better.
Yeah, I agree with the spot on Illinois. Had that circled as well. But even though they're one of my teams that I just have circled as who is this team? Because they're just a Jekyll and Hyde sometimes. But I agree on the spot here and the matchup. I'll throw out a couple spots early that are similar. Oklahoma, they just burnt me, but I think they match up pretty well against Kansas, especially at home. They can control the tempo, keep Kansas out of transition where they really thrive. I still think Kansas has some issues, especially from a depth perspective. They also struggle to defend cutting action, which Oklahoma does really well. They're in the Kansas 14th percentile per synergy there. Oklahoma's also due for some shooting regression on both ends in league play. They're 15th percentile nationally on uncontested jumpers. Some of those are going to start to fall. I also like some of the rotation things I saw. Like they were going with a couple guys, Bamasili and Owe. They were playing a little bit more, which I think gives Porter Moser a little more flexibility. And it gives them a little more athleticism here to match up with Kansas. Earlier this year, they were 2 of 17 from deep in Lawrence. They lost by 3. They actually led by 10 with 5 to go before Kansas closed on an 18-4 run. That ended in a 4-point loss, which sums up Oklahoma's season. They've lost by 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, and 4. And, just that Baylor the other night, they were right there. This is a huge, massive game for Oklahoma, who is teetering on the bubble. They need this game bad. I think you get then, by the way, that doesn't always mean that the team's going to win. Sometimes these teams, you'll see more teams play themselves out of the bubble than in. But I think after Kansas's big win on Monday, Oklahoma's reeling here. They've lost 6 straight conference games, been much better at home. I think it's a good spot for Oklahoma. And then, speaking of their one win, Oklahoma, a couple weeks ago, when I was on them against Alabama, they beat by 40. I think we got to fade Alabama on Saturday against Auburn. I mean, Auburn's been better of late. They dropped 4 or 5, so I think it's a good buy low, sell high spot. 3 of those losses came on the road against quality opponents and games they could have won easily. And 2 of the 4 losses came against Texas A&M, but they don't really match up well with, and they probably should have beat Texas A&M regardless the last game. Because why? Texas A&M, they turn opponents over, they dominate the offensive glass, and they get to the line a ton. That's the formula for beating Auburn. They struggle in all 3 of those areas. Well, the Tide are 7th or worse in the SEC in all 3 of those categories. Most importantly, they're outside the top 300 in turnovers force, which just crushes the Auburn offense. Now, Auburn, their guards, it's just night and day. Their erratic guard play. At home, they are so much better. They also have some shooting regression coming their way. And same with Alabama. I mean, teams are shooting 21% in league play from 3 against Alabama. I know no one in the SEC could shoot. I know Alabama has a ton of length, but that's artificially low. And for what it's worth, per Haslam metrics, Alabama's 353rd in the country in the away from home metric, which is the difference between their home and away performance. They're also, believe it or not, 358th in consistency. The team that I think that's one of the teams you could trust, but they're 358th in consistency. And what does Alabama do? It's rim, get to the rim, or shoot a 3. There's no mid-range. Well, Auburn, 99th percentile in points per possession allowed on 3-pointers, 97th percentile in points per possession allowed at the rim. They're an elite rim and 3 defense. So I think it's a smash spot for Auburn here against Alabama at home. Mike, let me throw it to you. What do you got?
Oh, I totally agree with that breakdown. We talked about it, the learning lesson from last week when I was watching Bama against LSU. It's that when they go into those lulls and, they pass it around the perimeter, they can't find the open look. They just head down, dive into the lane, and don't take very competitive shots inside of 5 feet. You saw so many blocks, and I think it was a 10-possession run against LSU, which ended up ruining their chances of covering that game. Just a question for you, Stuck. What number would you say is your cutoff to play Auburn in that spot?
Let's see. I think Auburn is probably going to open as
Alabama has
open 4. I think it'll open 4 and then
Alabama
come down
-3.
Yeah, I think it'll open at 4, probably come down. I would love to get a 2, ideally, but I think they win. What do you got next?
All right, I'm going to go to the middling of all mid-major conferences, which is the A10. Basically the soft middle of the A10. Who's to say who's the 9th best team and who's the 4th best team? So I'm going to go ahead and play one of the hot teams right now, and that's St. Joe's. They're hosting George Washington. St. Joe's have won 6 of 8 straight up.
Homer.
This is first time on the pod in multiple years ever playing St. Joe's. Eric Reynolds II is finally living up to the hype. He's averaging 20 points per game, really improved from 3-point shooting and his 3-point shooting during this run. And Hawk Hill's been looking for a game like this to get fired up for. It's a 1:00 tip on a Saturday. And this is the moment to potentially help yourself in the A10 tournament, because all these conference tournaments are a little bit different in terms of their structure. But if you get a top 4 seed, that's a double bye. They're a game and a half out. This becomes a must-win situation against a George Washington team who's pretty awful defensively, 296 in opponent shooting percentage. They allow teams to essentially operate their offense unimpeded, 330th in assist to made basket ratio, and they barely force any turnovers, only 11 per game. That's 280th. So with as well as St. Joe's has played, including an overtime loss down at GW where they only lost by 1 in OT, I think this is the time to buy on St. Joe's. I'll probably play this up to -3, maybe -3.5 is probably my cutoff. But if there was ever a time to get in on the Hawks, I think now's the time.
I mean, the Hawks technically still are mathematically allowed to win the A10, and nothing would shock me in the A10 this year. And yeah, GW, my alma mater, who stinks, did just beat Richmond in double overtime last night. And, now they hit the road, and that's important because they have 0 bench. They literally have no bench whatsoever. So now you're on the road after a double OT wild game that ended 107-105. So legs could be an issue this late in the year for a team that's going to be playing, a couple days after a double overtime thriller. BJ, what do you got?
Let's go Oregon against UCLA. The last time that UCLA had one of these back-to-back road trips playing on a Thursday and Saturday, They beat Arizona State, and then they lost very convincingly to Arizona in Tucson. UCLA plays Oregon State on Thursday night, so they're probably going to beat them because they're a 15-point favorite. But the biggest thing when you match up with UCLA, they're one of the highest frequency pick and roll teams in the country, so you have to be able to defend it. If you look at the teams that they've lost to, Illinois, Baylor, Arizona, and USC. Well, Illinois, Baylor, and Arizona are all top 25 in the country in points per possession allowed off the pick and roll. And USC is still top 100 in that category. Oregon is 60th in defending ball screens. Now, the worry here is Oregon doesn't defend the mid-range jumper that well, but if you're able to defend the pick and roll, you do take away a lot of those easy pull-up mid-range jumpers for Tiger and Jaquez and company as well. And UCLA, they obviously love to play their slow pace, and majority of their offense coming from the half court. Well, Oregon is a top 50 team in the country in points per possession allowed in the half court. They're third in the Pac-12 during conference play. And you also have to be able to rebound the ball against UCLA because they're a top 20 team in offensive rebounding percentage, and Oregon can do that as well. And for whatever reason, in conference play, teams are shooting 82% from the line against Oregon. So their free throw defense sucks. But on the flip side of it is UCLA has been pretty average defending inside, like they're 7th in the Pac-12 and 2-point field goal percentage. Well, Oregon is the best team in the Pac-12, shooting over 55% during conference play from inside the arc and 62% on shot attempts at the rim. So catching UCLA on a back-to-back, like we've already seen once this season, I like Oregon as a dog here.
Yeah, Oregon. Again, I mean, you're going with Illinois and Oregon. Those are two of the hardest ballsy, the two of the hardest teams to figure out in the country. But I think you want to zone this UCLA team. It kind of disrupts a lot of what they do, and you could they haven't been great against the press. Now they faced 150 possessions. They've been the 40th percentile. They've also been worse against zone and man. Oregon will throw out a ton of press and a ton of zone. So that could be effective here. And it really kind of disrupts everything that UCLA wants to do from a half court perspective. So, yeah, I also think that Oregon, I would want them to, even though maybe it costs you a tiny bit of value, but I would want them to win the night against USC, which I think they do. But I think that they can carry that momentum over for a huge game. Are they on the bubble? Let's see. They'd have to. Yeah, they are. It'll be a huge weekend for them if they can get the sweep. All right. Let me throw out. How many do you guys have left? For
just one.
Yeah, I can go one
DJ?
or two more.
Okay. Let's see. Let's throw out. All right, here's an ugly one. Georgia State. They're going to be playing their 4th straight home game, taking on Marshall, who's going to be playing their 4th straight road game. They absolutely were embarrassed at Marshall earlier this year. They trailed by 50 at one point. Biggest reason for this handicap is Marshall has no bench whatsoever. They play mainly 5 to 6 guys, but one guy off the bench. One of the shortest benches in all of college basketball. And they play as fast as anybody. And they're playing their 4th straight road game late in the season. Legs. This is a nightmare spot. So I'll be looking for Georgia State as a home dog. Speaking of, same conference, JMU, 4th straight road game against Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina, great transition defense, which is important against JMU. They've also underachieved, but they recently got Jamora Brown back. He didn't play in the first meeting, which JMU won. And JMU, everything they do is predicated on getting to the rim. They get to the rim on 57% of possessions. That's 98th percentile, 6th highest in the country. Coastal Carolina does a phenomenal job of preventing teams from getting to the rim. That's the 7th lowest in the country. So I think it's a pretty good matchup, a good spot for an underachieving Coastal Carolina team that I think is probably at the bottom of the market. And then why not an ugly one? Monmouth, they're covering machine. Probably going back to Monmouth against Hofstra. They started out 1-20. They've won 4 straight, all as underdogs. And the emergence of a walk-on, Jakari Spence at point guard, has helped. They had so many turnover issues. Has helped alleviate some of their turnover issues. He's had 20 assists to just 8 turnovers during their current 4-game winning streak. And this is a team that basically was brand new. So, to see King Rice kind of have them playing better as the year has progressed is not that surprising. I'll go back to the well with Monmouth as a dog. Mike, what else you got?
So the last one that I have here is it pays to know the scheduling quirks. We talked about it in the Pac-12, where you get those Thursday, Saturday road trips, which can be pretty lengthy in terms of overall distance traveled. The Ivy League's another one for me, where you have those Friday, Saturday back-to-backs. And when you can avoid that, I think that changes the calculus on these games. And for me, Princeton traveling to Dartmouth, I know they went to overtime at home against them in the last time that they played. Princeton's won 8 of their last 10 games straight up. Awoma has been tremendous. He also gave Dartmouth 20 points in that overtime win. And Dartmouth in general is one of those teams that at this point in the season, to be able to crack the top 4 and to make the Ivy League tournament, it's not going to happen for them. So it's a little bit difficult in terms of overall motivation. Plus, they're buried in the 300s and a lot of the shooting metrics. They can't get their own offensive rebounds to be able to offset that. And this is a Princeton team that needs to stay focused to be able to lock up that number 1, overall seed and potentially set themselves up for a postseason if they aren't able to win the Ivy League tournament. So with all of those motivation factors and the fact that they don't have to play a back-to-back on the road, I'm going to go ahead here with the Tigers. I think they win by double digits. So I'd go ahead and lay all the way up to 10 here with Princeton.
BJ?
Let's go Texas Tech at home against Kansas State. The last time these two teams met, Texas Tech could have very easily won this game. They were up. Yeah, they were up by 8 with 13 to play. It was 50-50 with 8:46 left in the game, and then they just didn't score for 6 straight minutes. And Kansas State ended up winning by 10. And now the Red Raiders are 1-10 in Big 12 play. 6 of those 10 losses have come by 7 points or less. In the last meeting, they did hold Kansas State to 32% from behind the arc, but the Wildcats went to the free throw line 27 times compared to just 12 for Texas Tech. And Tech, they are a top 50 team in the country in field goal percentage at the rim, when Kansas State is very average at defending inside. They're 7th in the Big 12 in 2-point field goal percentage, while the Wildcats are just an elite 3-point defense, but Texas Tech doesn't take a lot of 3-pointers. So it's a good spot here for Texas Tech, coming off back-to-back road losses, while Kansas State coming off a couple wins here. So I think this is just a slam dunk Texas Tech spot. So Ken Palm has us at Kansas State -2. So I'll take anything Texas Tech plus money and get hurt once again.
Yeah, I think this Kansas State team's been quite fortunate. In league play, they're shooting close to 38% from 3. They're holding teams at 27%. They lead the conference in both. They've gone 4-0 in overtime on the season. I would agree with Texas Tech as well here. I'll throw out St. Francis, PA. They just solved the Merrimack zone. They actually can shoot the 3. I think they'll be better prepared. We'll see. I'll have a write-up on all my favorite spots. That'll be in there. How about one more? Michigan, maybe. Do we sell Indiana now? I mentioned that Haslametrics away from home metric. Well, they are 362nd in the country in away from home performance.
That'd be second to last, right?
Yep.
Who's the worst?
And
I'm curious.
I don't know. I gotta look.
Bradley.
All right, the worst team in the away from home metric. By the way, Georgia State is the 3rd worst, and it's the difference between home and away. Which I'm looking to bet them against Marshall. Iowa is the 4th worst. I
believe that.
And
Iowa State. It's okay. They're gonna be
Iowa State's the 6th worst. Bradley's the 7th worst. Duke's the 8th worst. The worst is Rutgers. Worst in the country with their
no home cooking like the rack, so that makes sense.
Yep. The best away from home performance, USF. That is a random one. It's probably just because they suck at home. There's a lot of noise in the best ones. Like UNLV is up there. Wichita State.
Who is it? Is it East Tennessee State? Is that one of the teams that can't
East Tennessee State's right up there? Yeah, I think they can't win at home this year, which is very odd. They have a decent home court advantage usually. What was I going to say? Yeah, Michigan. And by the way, Michigan since 2005, 98, 68, and 2 against the spread at home in conference play. One of the most underrated home court advantages, I still think, in the country. It doesn't get as much love as some of the other top ones, but I think that Michigan could do some things here, and Indiana might be. They just come off 2 huge wins. It's not the best of spots. Michigan fighting for their tourney lives, and Indiana might be adding some players back. Xavier Johnson might come back, which I think is good for their long-term perspectives, their long-term prospects, but it might not be great for like the first game or two, right? He's going to have some rust. You got to work him back into the rotation, might throw off some of the rhythm they're building. So I think Michigan does it again at home against Indiana.